Hey, thanks for checking out the Illini Inquirer YouTube channel. If you can do us a favor, continue your support. Give us a follow here on YouTube. Hit the notifications button, hit the subscribe button. That really helps us out. We're hoping to give you more content on our video channel here, whether it's player interviews, reactions, our daily dish series where we're going to be more topical and talk about the Illini. So give us some support. We appreciate all of it. Give us a follow, hit the notifications bell as well, and subscribe to us here on Illini Inquirer YouTube. All right, Joey Wagner joining us. And Joey, let's talk about UCLA and USC to the Big Ten. The last time we talked about this in the podcast, it wasn't official yet, but later that night, it became official. And now we have to think of a world where USC, where we grew up watching Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush and Lendale White and that crew kind of owning college football there for a moment. And obviously a very, very good program. Struggled here recently, but with the coach they have now, the recruits they're getting, it feels like USC is going to bounce back. It's going to be interesting to see how they fit in the Big Ten. UCLA has been a program that obviously has a lot of prestige, but hasn't had a lot of football success. One reason I've discussed on here that we've talked about who would be a good non-conference opponent. I think UCLA would be great, kind of a basketball school, but football, they've had some nice years, but never really a lot of sustained success. So how do you think locally USC UCLA impacts joining the Big Ten football impacts Illinois football?
Yeah, I think the biggest way, Jeremy, is divisions. Like we've seen divisions kind of go away in the ACC. We know that's a real possibility with the rule change. We basically don't have to have divisions to put two teams in the conference championship game. So that's a big one. Like this gives the excuse, right? There's two outliers on the West Coast that you can't necessarily just shoehorn into the Big Ten West and say, here it is, surprise. Like this feels like I'm not even the first domino, just another domino to fall and finally punting these things. And that's a big deal for Illinois because we've talked about it. I don't think it's a secret. We'd be naive to think this wasn't true. You want to be in the West if you're Illinois, if you're trying to rebuild, if you're trying to get up there. It's a more winnable division. Ohio State's not in the West. Michigan's not in the West. Michigan State, Penn State, like those are the powerhouses right now of the Big Ten, and you don't have to deal with them to win your division. Like that to me is far and away the biggest answer.
See, I'm going to go even more macro than this, Joey. This is a phenomenal thing for Illinois. Okay. We could talk about the micro and I'll dive into that, but if Illinois, if they had a relegation system in college football, Illinois would have been relegated a long time ago. Right. But you're in the Big Ten and you are a founding member of the Big Ten. You have one of the biggest alumni bases. So you are still very, very valuable, right, to the Big Ten, given all of that. But you have just not been successful in college football. But now, all of a sudden, Illinois has been gaining, right? It feels like, maybe not on the field, but with every other resource, despite having a bad football program for a long time, Illinois has some of the best facilities, at least practice facilities, right? Or the whole Smith Center, right? You have all of these resources pouring into the program because you're in the Big Ten. And now that's only going to increase. So you have to get the hire right. You have to get the right leader. And that's what Josh Wheelan hopes with Bret Bielema. And it's really important for Bret Bielema to get this thing right and just have some sustained success relatively for Illinois. But at the same time, like you are now definitely one of the haves in college football. Despite the lack of success, you are a have just by being in the Big Ten. You are probably in a couple of years going to make hundreds of millions in TV revenue, right? Like 9 figures of media rights revenue. And a lot of that is because of the football aspect of the Big Ten. So the fact that you're in that and not in the ACC or the Big 12, like you have a one-up on all of those programs and the Pac-12 or whatever that's going to be, right? Like you have a one-up. So even though you haven't risen quite yet, the Big Ten is taking you with them a little bit. So that's my big takeaways. It's much better to be in the super conference than to be felt left out. Like NC State right now, Kansas State right now, better football programs in Illinois, but for the long term, Illinois is positioned better. So like in recruiting, Joey, if I'm going up against those schools and I'm Bret Bielema, it's like, we're in the super conference. Where the eyeballs are, where the resources are. So to win those recruiting battles, I think just became a little easier for Illinois.
You hope so, right? And if you're Illinois, you hope it became easier because that's a pretty good pitch. If you're going up against teams in the present day, I have to say present day because we're filming this on Tuesday at 12:30. Who knows what it's going to look like by, I mean, literally as early as tonight. You don't know. You never know. Like the present day ACC, the present day Big 12, the present day Pac-12. Now, how soon all that changes, I don't know. But you have this window right now on the recruiting trail that you can say, we're here. We're here. Like, you don't have to worry about this. We're going to continue to have, I mean, really go into it. You're going to continue to have funding for your program. You're going to continue to make a lot of money. Like, all of that matters if you want to try to sustain something, Jeremy. But you want to look at each school individually. Like, does USC, how do I want to put, does it matter to Illinois? Like, it probably matters to Ohio State. It probably matters to Penn State. It probably matters to Michigan. But where Illinois is right now, USC doesn't change much for who you are or what you need to do. You're going to see them starting in 2024 a couple times, or once every couple of years. That's probably not going to be fun. I mean, it's just not. But
I mean, from the head-to-head aspect, I don't know if you're competing for recruits. I don't know if you're competing at the same level of the Big Ten, right? Like I think Illinois fans understand, like, it's kind of a different world. Like Ohio State, Michigan, even, Penn State, now USC, like they're competing for a different level of college football right now. Illinois is just trying to find a way to bowl games, find a way to rise what is now the division. You mentioned the divisions, Joey. I think as of right now, if like nothing else changed, which I don't think is going to be the case, but if the Big Ten stayed at 16 entering 2024, right, they wiped out the schedules a couple weeks ago for a reason online, and this found out is the reason. I would imagine they go to a 3-6-6 model where you have 3 protected rivalries. And I think if you're Illinois, you hope that is Northwestern, Purdue, and I think Indiana makes a lot of sense. But if it's Iowa or whoever, or if it's Ohio State, I don't think that makes a lot of sense for the Big Ten. But I think that would make sense for Illinois. And then you play half the league, twice every 4 years, right? So that would make a lot of sense. But then what if 4 more teams join? What if Notre Dame, 2 Pac-12 teams, maybe an ACC team? I don't know. What if that joins? Then do we even have, like, do you go back to divisions? Do you go back to a West-East split? Like, where Notre Dame's I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. Either way, I still think Illinois is trying to do what it's doing. Like, I don't think a ton changes about, hey, we're trying to beat more of our peers, right? We're trying to more consistently compete with our peers. Does that become tougher? I don't know. I think it's been tough anyway, right? Like Purdue, Minnesota, look how much those programs have risen. Like everybody in the Big Ten, because of these media rights deals, has great resources and can go and hire, steal good coaches, right? And then they can build great facilities. I don't think that changes. I think it just elevates your game a little bit, elevates your resources, but it does the same for everybody else. So I still think you're looking to compete and beat Indiana, Purdue, Northwestern, Iowa, those programs more, and find a way to where eventually can we have the sustained success that Iowa has, right? Like, I think that still is the goal, or to be the next Michigan State. Like, I still think those are the goal.
Yeah, that was exactly my next point. Put UCLA into that mix as well. Like, your peers, if you're Illinois, do not change. You still are trying to catch the Northwesterns, and I know Northwestern's they're such a weird team year to year. Yeah, I know that, but you're trying to get to them. You're trying to get to the Wisconsins, the Iowa, where you know what you are year over year. And on the way, you're trying to get to Purdue, right? Like, you're trying, all those schools that you're trying to be, you're trying to pass, those don't change. You just added a super heavyweight. That's really not going to be your problem by and large, other than a couple times, once every couple of years. And UCLA, which probably by and large isn't going to be much a problem, except for once every couple of years. But the fundamentals of who you need to pass, they're still there, and this doesn't change for them either, really, right? Like, it's still the same schools trying to fight for that. Like, the upper tier is the upper tier. I only would like to not be in the bottom tier anymore. Like, find your way into that middle tier, and I think you can really do some work there.
Yeah. So Joey, if the Big Ten gets to say 20, who are the teams? Who's your list? Everyone has a list right now. What's Joey Wagner's list?
I need four more.
Yeah. So adding to UCLA and USC, that gets us to 16. Who are the four more they're going to add over the next, I would say, 4 years, right? Like, I don't know if it happens right away. I think Notre Dame, like that'll be the big domino. And maybe if Notre Dame goes this year, then maybe all of a sudden you do add 3 more. But over the next couple of years, if you add 4 more, who are they?
There's no bigger domino than Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame right now exists as probably the most interesting team in college sports because whatever they do, like imagine if they go to the Big Ten, like that's Scrooge McDuck money you're talking to at some of these deals. Like that's a big deal. So you put Notre Dame. I think Oregon would be fascinating because you still have to have West Coast teams, right? Like it's still in my mind doesn't compute to have 2 teams all the way out west. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So do you poach from the Pac-12? Do you get an Oregon? I don't know how attractive would Stanford be? Washington. Those 3. Colorado would be in that mix for me. You've got to pick 3 leftovers really, and I hate to say leftovers, but the Pac-12 is kind of on thin ice here a little bit. So give me Oregon, Notre Dame. Saying Washington without Washington State's hard, isn't it?
Seems like it. I think Washington's a really good brand. It's especially on the West Coast. It's a good market. I don't know how much markets matter anymore. It's not as good of a brand as some other teams. Like if you could get a North Carolina, I don't know how gettable North Carolina is, especially right now. I think that would be the next 4 if once the ACC grant of rights is more, more affordable for some of those teams to kind of take away from. I think the schools I'm settling on are Oregon would be big, but Notre Dame's obviously the clear one. I think Oregon, Washington would make a nice West Coast, but after Notre Dame, I think Stanford might be it, Joey. Academically, the presidents and chancellors care a lot about that. They are a fantastic athletics program. Now their basketball, football isn't as big, but they already have rivalries with USC and Notre Dame. Michigan has played Stanford some years. Like I think it's a fit culturally, athletically, and you add them with USC and USC, and I think it helps your Olympic sports profile a lot. How much does that matter? I don't know, but like I still think it's a really good brand. Stanford Northwestern could be a nice rivalry, right? If we're trying to figure out future of that. And if market does matter, and I still think it matters a little bit, getting into the Bay Area, I think would be important. I think Stanford's probably better than Cal at this point with where Cal is. So I think Notre Dame, Stanford, Oregon, and do you just bring Washington along or do you look to poach the ACC? Because North Carolina sure would be a big brand, Joey. And in that market, in that part of the country, you're talking about expanding your reach, getting brands. North Carolina basketball is one of the biggest brands in sports. You get the Jordan brand involved there. I think North Carolina would certainly be probably number 2 on the Big Ten's list of desires after Notre Dame, which is interesting because it's not football, right? Like I haven't included Miami or Florida State or some of those. Clemson, I think, would be SEC bound if this happens. But everything about the Big Ten, academic still matters. The athletic profile matters, reach matters. And I think, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Stanford, Oregon, Washington all make pretty much sense. That's 5, but 4 of those.
So in your hypothesis, like you would still have the 2 that we already know, UCLA and USC, Oregon and Stanford out west. Like a 14 pod out west feels fine to me, doesn't it? Like that feels okay. Because on the east, you kind of have that a little bit with Penn State, Rutgers, Maryland. That's 3 teams, but whatever.
It would be weird with Washington kind of out on its own, like going to the Big 12, wouldn't it? Like I know they could add Utah and things like that. I just struggle to take Oregon without Washington or struggle to take Washington without, I just think those 2 make a lot of sense together. Their athletic brands, I think, are strong. But Stanford might just be the better fit. overall if you want to take between Stanford and Washington.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard for me because my mind still goes to geography, and it shouldn't. Like I have to acknowledge that it shouldn't, and it's a stupid thing for my mind to do that. But here I am envisioning, like I've already somehow my logic doesn't make any sense, Jeremy. Like I've talked myself into the UCLA and USC area. Then Washington to me is like, oh, I don't know, man, that's kind of out there a little bit. But like you can't think like that anymore. And I
Seattle's
think
pretty awesome.
that's what we all have to come to grips to is we can't think geographic anymore. And it's a very weird reality to face, right? But maybe in some instances it still matters. It's probably what would make Notre Dame and the Big Ten an attractive match in some capacity outside of the fact that you just added those two. But dude, this is weird. It's good for the Big Ten. There's going to be a lot of money rolling through that place and through those schools. It is just a little weird to just say, whatever, geography doesn't matter. Here's the best academic profiles, the best athletic profiles. To your point, does market matter? Probably, but might be overstated in some capacities. But man, Big Ten network from East Coast to West Coast. Is that real?
Who would have thought a year ago, after Texas and Oklahoma got poached, that the Big 12 might be in a good spot as like the third league or fourth league, right? Like they're going to poach all these Pac-12 programs, which I would go on the offensive, set yourself up as the best have-not conference, right? Get yourself a good media rights deal, not a great one, but like there will still be a ton of interest in those programs. If you can steal Arizona, let's be the number one basketball conference. I think that's what the Big 12 is going for with some solid football, right? Like, so good for them. But the Pac-12, man, looking real danger of just, disappearing, which is crazy to think about, Joey.
Pac-12's trying to find a friend anywhere, man. Yeah, like they tried the alliance thing. Well, so that didn't really work out for the Pac-12. Like now they're trying to, the Big 12 need a friend. Like the Pac-12 is just looking for someone, man. They're tired of spending weekends alone.
Didn't know Kevin Warren had this kind of ruthlessness in him, but man, it was a big move for him. Even if, hey, people come to him and say, hey, we want to join your conference, he said yes. So kudos to Kevin Warren for making the move that is going to really obviously be the biggest one of his tenure, most likely.
So two things: how aggressive does the Big Ten have to be in terms of making the calls? Like, can you just put your feet up and let schools call you?
Yeah, it's Notre Dame right now. It's got to be Notre Dame. You don't want to probably make another move without Notre Dame. And I think Notre Dame now knows like this independence thing doesn't make sense anymore. It just doesn't make sense anymore when we're losing 85 million potentially on the table. And it's still such a huge brand that the Big Ten wants them. It would really increase, right? Like their media rights deal. And it just makes sense. Notre Dame in the Big Ten has always made sense. So I think that's the one they're waiting for. And otherwise, they know, I don't think Oregon, Stanford are going to jump on board of the Big 12. I don't think so. I just think they're waiting on Notre Dame to kind of be that piece. And I think the SEC is too, because if Notre Dame joins the Big Ten, I think that's when they go get Clemson. I think that's when they maybe go get Miami, Florida State.
Yeah. Second part, Jeremy, we're like 3 weeks away from Big Ten football media days. How interesting did this just get in the last 6 days? I mean, I'm glad it's not just reports, right? Like I'm glad it's out there and we don't have to dance around anything. I'm fascinated to hear Kevin Warren discuss this and really I don't know how interested I am in some of the other coaches because the answer is always going to be, yeah, it's great. We love it. Like I would be more floored if the opposite happened. If someone's like, this stinks, this is the worst. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case, but it's an interesting angle. And by the way, everyone's going to be talking about it in Indianapolis. Everyone.
Yeah. We'll be talking about it for a while here in Illini Inquirer. Thank you, Joey.